Shalom to my students and alumni. This four-part series I like to call The Need for a Rav and How to Go About Finding One. So we'll begin with a little bit of maybe history. There's always been a Masorah that people would be going to Rabbanim all the way to biblical times. Parshas Yisro has that Moshe Rabbeinu stands, he actually sets aside time for answering questions of the Jewish people, so much so that Yitro, his father-in-law, actually feels that he's working too hard. Yitro asks him what he's doing, and Moshe Rabbeinu says, Ki yeh lahem davar bo elai v'shafati ben ish uben re'eu v'adati et chukei ha'elokim v'toratav. So Moshe Rabbeinu already, in biblical times, the Jewish people come to Moshe Rabbeinu and he takes many, many inquiries and questions and begins to answer them. He's quite busy with it, so much so that Yitro is a little bit worried about his health and starts arranging some other system that will make it a little bit easier on Moshe. The Rambam actually says over there that he answered all types of questions. The Rambam has questions about, praying for others, helping people out through finding lost objects because he was a prophet, and of course teaching Torah, if people had questions about Torah, and other things as well. So we see this idea already in the Torah that people needed a Rav. And this continues on when we have the great scholars of our times, or maybe previous times, these great scholars like Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, Reb Chaim Brisker, the Aderes, Reb Elio David Rabinovich Ta'omim, who was known as the Aderes, Rev Kook's father-in-law. Both of them, there are stories about both of them having Rabbi Yitzchak Spector, who was the Rav of Lithuania, of the capital. He lived in the capital of Lithuania, in Kovna. He would answer their questions. Reb Chaim Brisker would send questions to Rabbi Yitzchak Spector, the Kovna Rav, because even Reb Chaim Brisker had questions that he was afraid to decide, or he wanted to have other opinions, and he would send to him. And in fact, Reb Chaim was such a great lamdan that he used to ask the Kovna Rav not to give him reasons for why he's poskening that way, but just poskening that way because he felt if he gives him reasons, he could actually knock each reason off. But he knew that he'd be poskening the correct way because he had what we call the siyata d'shmaya. The Aderes actually had also Rabbi Yitzchak Spector. When Rabbi Yitzchak Spector died, he went to the Marsham, another great posek who wrote many responsa work, Shailas Teshuvos and Marsham, and we have responds to him, asking him questions, even though the Aderes himself was a huge Talmud Chacham. So every person really had, every rabbi, even a great rabbi, had someone that they went to speak things over. These great people felt that part of their position was to answer questions. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu, their position was to answer questions, and therefore one doesn't have to feel that one doesn't have to feel uncomfortable with with asking rabbis questions, because that's really part of the position of the rabbis. I remember hearing from my grandfather once that I spoke to him about the fact that he was taking so many questions and so many appointments that he didn't have very much time to learn. And I asked him if he feels bad about not learning Torah every day, or enough Torah every day, because he's so busy with appointments and seeing people. And he said, till age 70, I used to feel bad, but after age 70, I don't feel bad anymore, because after age 70, we call it in Yiddish, gegeben yarin. In other words, a person's supposed to live 70 years. If he lives longer, it's not really for himself, it's really for the tzibur, it's for the public. And therefore, he feels that was his purpose, very much living for the public. And therefore, he did take the questions of people, he did take appointments, and he was busy all the time, and he felt that was basically his job. In Chazal, we already find the idea of Aseh L'cha Rav, We actually find it in two different Mishnayot. We have one Mishnah that talks about Rabbi Yishuv ben Prachi, Nita Aberli, Kiblu Mehem, Yishuv ben Prachi Omer, Asei lecha Rav, Uknei lecha Chaver. One Mishnah says you should make for yourself a Rav, and you should acquire yourself a friend. In the same parak Aleph, you also have Rabbi Gamliel says, Asei lecha Rav v'stalk min hasafek. You should make for yourself a Rav and be able to get rid of your doubts. So here again we see in the Mishnah, in Avot, that the Mishnah tells you and basically gives you good advice to make for yourself a Rav. So that is really the idea. Every person, whether they're great people, Rabbanim themselves, or they're the laymen like we are, should have themselves a Rav. In fact, the Rambam differentiates between the two Mishnayot, because why do you need two Mishnayot with the same thing? He says the first one is a Rav for learning Torah. And that's why it says, Asei lecha Rav, uknei lecha Chaver. You should have a Rav and you should have a good Chavruta as well, a good friend as well. The other one is talking about more halacha, not just learning Torah, learning how to learn Torah, but halacha itself. Asei lecha Rav v'stalk min hasafek. If you make for yourself a Rav, you won't have doubts. And many times when we do have doubts, we tend to be more machmir. And a lot of times, chumrah comes really to a kula, meaning the being stringent has its negative points. Sometimes you're stringent on the family, and you really don't have to be, but you didn't ask the Rav. The Rav would have given you a heter for something. So we should really try. Reb Chaim Volozhin actually says this in his commentary on Mishnayos. We should try to avoid being machmer because we don't know the halacha, and rather go to a Rav and find out what the true halacha is, so we don't have any doubts. Now, there are a number of categories which we can talk about when we speak about finding a Rav. Like we said, there's one for learning Torah. You want a Rav for learning Torah. There's one for halacha, which we had in the Mishnah, and there's also a third one, which a lot of people go to Rabbanim today. They go to a Rav for hashkafa, for certain seeing about a certain Jewish outlook, and it was checking the Torah perspective on a particular issue. That's not necessarily a halachic issue. It could be a non-halachic issue, but they want to know about if they're moving into a neighborhood that's more secular. They want to know, is that a good idea? Is taking a certain type of job? They want to know if it's a certain type of investment. Now, again, obviously the Rav would have to have a certain breadth of knowledge in different areas, or personal lives, a person dealing with a child or something, education. They may go to a Rav to get a perspective, even if they themselves have degrees in education. They want to get a Torah perspective on the idea. So I would like to discuss these different areas of having a Rav. One is learning Torah, one is halacha, and one is hashkafa. I just want to add to all this that it doesn't mean, let's say, a woman also has to have a Rav. She could have a Rav, or she could have a Rebbitzin. We're basically talking about developing a relationship with a mentor.